In today's episode, I speak to Rosie Julin on what it's like to be a young maverick, how to use your maverick mindset before you have the experience. What are the benefits of this and what are the consequences? We also talk about Rosie's venture into entrepreneurship and how that didn't work out because she didn't think through the strategy. We also discuss what she has learned and how she has applied this knowledge. Rosie explains how really listening is maverick and what she has learned in her travelling, speaking to different people in different circumstances. Listen up to the rest of the conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is Rosie Julin. Hi Rosie.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, but before we begin, tell us a bit about you.
So first I want to say thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I create audio documentaries for my podcast, Popcuria. So that means that I get to travel around and talk to people about what it means to live where they live. And I am currently launching our first season.
Wow. How many episodes have you done?
3.
It sounds to me like it's an exciting proposition and quite unusual when people prefer to podcast from a studio. So is this your first Maverick idea?
No, this actually stemmed from a Maverick idea that did not go well. Mm-hmm. I had a 9-to-5 before this for about 5 years and then quit that and had I guess you could say, a stereotypical quarter-life crisis where I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do next, but wanted to pursue something that I loved, which is traveling around, and wanted to do something where I could do that as much as possible, much more than I could in my previous 9-to-5. So was doing a lot of reflecting, and my first idea was to take a skill set that I have, which is bartending, and purchased a wooden cocktail bar on a bike with 2 taps on an insulated wooden ice cream bike, and was going to travel the world by bike selling cocktails in order to support myself. And that did not go well. The bike showed up. It was too heavy for me to push or bike around or lift or really maneuver it in any sort of way long term. Had no real means of transporting it anywhere. It was a very poorly executed idea, but it was a good first step because it led me to really reflect on why I was pursuing that in the first place. And it was because my favorite part about traveling around is talking to people, getting to know them a little bit and getting to understand a little bit more about where they're coming from and what it means to live where they live. So that created Popcuria.
Well, that sounds interesting, kind of taking it from that first idea and to bring it into a bit more of a more mature idea, I guess. Mm-hmm. What did your friends think when this bike turned up?
Well, a good friend of mine helped me move it, and he got to know me pretty quickly at that point because he realized that it wasn't, the details weren't ironed out completely. I had the vision, but the details weren't quite there. And that has since been a reoccurring theme in our relationship that, have you thought everything through? So sometimes the Maverick mindset is wonderful to have. It's wonderful to have the vision and wonderful to have the confidence, even if not entirely earned, that you can just go do things. But it does have its downsides. But hopefully you learn from it. I think I have, and I'm trying to take what I've learned and incorporate it into my new business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes guts to do that.
Thank you.
because you would probably had a lot of opposition. So to do it anyway, to follow your vision, and it didn't turn out. But rather than going, that's it, I'm going to go and get a 9 to 5, you said, okay, now how do I take that knowledge and put it somewhere else? So that's a lot of perseverance and resilience. Do you think it's easy to have a maverick mindset before you have the experience to put it into action?
No, and I'm glad you asked that question. So I am early on in my career, and it's challenging to have the mindset and the big ideas that come with that without the skills yet. And I, as you put this this pathological curiosity, with that comes a lot of I'm always wanting to learn new things. I always have questions. I always want new challenges. I always want to learn new things. And so the upside of that is that I'm constantly seeking out new sources of information as I learn, but I'm early on in my career. I'm still learning. And so with the vision, you need the skills. And so I am trying as hard as I can to pair the right skill set with the vision. So for Popcuria specifically, I actually just went back to school. I went to get a certificate in audio storytelling. So as I continue to develop the first season, my skill set's gotten much broader.
Well, that's really interesting as well, because it means that skill gives you an expertise in a much broader outlook as well.
And some tangible hard skills. I have a much better idea about story structure, and we've really focused a lot on ethical storytelling. And that was important to me because this past summer, I traveled around for a few months interviewing people and trying to take what they had to say and put it together in a compelling way. And people were so open and honest with me, and I wanted to honor that.
Well, that's very socialized maverick viewpoint as well, is honoring the people that you're working with, rather than being like an extreme maverick and using them. Do you think that there's a possibility of a lack of focus when someone's early in their career? So you have that curiosity that makes you search out the new, but a lack of focus as to how do you hone that knowledge into something?
Mm-hmm. I think it can certainly be perceived that way. I can only speak from my own experience. I have tried a few different things, and I think broadly they're linked by my interests. My interests have been pretty clear all the way through the various things that I've tried, but it can certainly seem to be a dabbler. And with that comes certain negative characteristics like unfocused or just all over the place. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I do think I'm stronger and have a wider, for my age, a wider set of expertise because I've tried a few different things.
Yeah, and also the days where you had maybe a couple of careers are over, isn't it? They say that they believe that Generation Z will probably have something like 15 different careers, which is amazing, because different careers is not the same as different jobs.
Correct.
And if you can imagine all the learning that needs to go to become a really good expert or specialist in one career, and then you switch it out and then have to do the same again. Not everyone's going to be able to do that.
That's true. But many skills are transferable.
That's true too. So what would because you were saying that it's difficult, or it's a skill to be able to marry up that curiosity and then that lack of experience. If somebody was going to help a maverick in the start of their career, what do you think they need?
I think they need space to experiment and an understanding manager that things might go awry, that with experimentation comes a bit of risk, and that's okay.
And do you think that the young maverick experiments at a higher degree than the conformists then?
I would say so. Although I do think as I'm developing my own skill set, I am increasingly learning that I have to be able to translate my big ideas to the larger audience, which means that I need to give everyone some sort of hook into what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to accomplish, the story that I'm trying to tell.
And do you think, what's the importance of being authentic for you then?
The importance of being authentic. I guess I wouldn't phrase the question that way necessarily, just because it's easier. It's just so much easier to be yourself. It's hard. It's hard to do anything else.
You know what? I'm laughing because it's so obvious, but so many people don't get that. Do you know what I mean? And they're exhausted because they are something else.
Yeah.
I've actually I have a digital magazine called the Maverick Paradox magazine, and I'm kind of putting together an article at the moment about how COVID-19 is making people more honest. Because, you know, like in the past, you may phone up somebody and you're like, how are you doing? And they're like, everything's great, everything's wonderful, blah, blah. Whereas now people are honest about it and they're like, well, I'm having some real ups and downs here. Or they'll say, you know, I haven't got enough money, or I'm worried about the money because, you know, no one's buying my product, or, you know, there's a layer of honesty now that hasn't existed before in such a wide scale, and I find that quite interesting that it's taken a pandemic for people to be real with each other. Any thoughts on why that would be?
Well, I mean, I think like you've said, this has really exposed our weaknesses individually and at large as a community and society.
Or maybe it's knowing that other people are in the same boat, so therefore it's okay to admit it. Maybe that's the difference. And I suppose the media is discussing it more. So, you know, there's so much talk about how to be more resilient, how to improve your well-being, mental health, now than they've had been in a long time. And it's like Mental Health Awareness Week. I don't know if that's international, just the UK. But generally speaking, you normally get, you know, the schools may do something and you might get, you know, some blogs. But it's not such a major deal where it's almost like everybody every day is talking about the mental health situation. But even then, I wonder whether it's real, because I'm just sort of pondering aloud and I'm sort of thinking, at the moment, everyone's concerned about the mental health of individuals being locked in and what does that mean and the uncertainty. But I don't see anybody writing or talking about it. What does it mean to people who have mental health issues, who are now in this situation? What's the impact of that? Do you know what I mean? Because those individuals with known mental health issues still seem to be ignored in all the thoughts of mental health issues. So that's a bit of a weird divergence from authenticity, but that's okay. But I do agree with you. Actually, being somebody else is far more exhausting than actually being yourself. So, what have you learned through traveling around? What countries did you go to?
Well, so the first season is based in the United States. I'm still trying to get my sea legs. So we road tripped all over. We went up to Maine, over to Minneapolis, and then Montana, down through Albuquerque, up through California to Santa Cruz, which is my hometown, and then back east. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is the importance of really listening, and how listening is really one of the most maverick things you can do. If you're using all of your brain to really focus in on what that person is trying to tell you, the things that they'll tell you are really quite amazing.
Yeah, and also it's when you listen, you hear what they're not telling you, which is as interesting as what they are telling you, or even more interesting sometimes. Did you find a real disparity between the different people in the states that you went in? So in the UK, for example, we kind of go the Americans. like everybody is the same. It's just like the Americans. Did you find a real difference? Did it make you think of your own stereotypes? Because I'm assuming that in America there's probably stereotypes for different people in different counties and different states. And did you find in your traveling that was enhanced, or did you realize that it was a nonsense, people are just individual?
Both. Because of my curiosity, I am always interested in what makes us a little bit different and how we can celebrate that. I think that's a positive thing. And that's what's fascinating about traveling. You're going around and learning something new. I think that's things that surprised me the most were the things that were unexpected. I mean, it's probably a bit cliche to say that, but it's true. I went into Minneapolis, and I was not expecting for everyone to be talking about housing problems. They're having a hard time with affordable housing. And of course, it's all about perspective. And from my perspective, I was looking at just the lump sum of money the housing costs as, wow, that seems really affordable. Because of course, coming from a coastal community in California and then now living in Washington, D.C., the numbers are quite different. But of course, it's all relative. But I was not expecting to have that be the conversation in Minneapolis, for example. And that was the thing that we ended up talking about the most. And, I am going into these communities. I am an inherent character in the stories that I produce. And I do think that me coming in with my set of perspectives then could have shifted the conversation slightly. If I latched on to someone saying that housing was an issue because of my own set of perspectives, because then I was curious about it. Well, what do you mean? This seems affordable. How is it not affordable, and why?
Yeah, that's very interesting. There's a big disparity, isn't it? And I've been thinking about this recently as well, is the act of empathy, how some individuals find it easy to empathise with people when they're going through the same thing, and then you've got others like Socialist Mavericks who empathise even though they've never been through the same thing. And I think it's quite intriguing on what does it take for someone else's troubles to bother you.
Well, I hope to foster that kind of empathy in the stories that I produce, because I do think generating empathy is a really an important thing today. There's, as you put, there's so much division. There is so much, particularly right now, people, as you pointed to earlier, as we're experiencing the pandemic, it's exposing where we fall short. And so if we're able to foster a little bit more empathy, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is really important, actually. I think there is not enough people considering other people that aren't like them, even if, and that doesn't necessarily mean race or gender. It could be simple as from, these Americans in this state are different from those Americans in that state, but what's common as opposed to what is it that's dividing. And I think these type of stories are really important.
I've certainly learned a lot. It's been wonderful. I'm glad to be able to do this.
So how has it changed you?
Well, I spoke to a bit of this earlier, but I do think I'm a stronger listener. I hope that carries through in my own personal relationships. A friend told me once that I stare, and I don't mean to do this, but I've developed the habit now where if I'm listening really intently to someone, I'll just stare them down. And of course, this is not a good technique. This is not what you should do. You should be making them feel comfortable. But as I'm learning and developing this skill, I've had to soften my gaze just a bit. But it's amazing if you leave enough space for a person and make them feel like they're being heard. The things that they'll share are really a really wonderful thing to share with a person.
Yeah, I agree. It made me laugh when you said that, because when I was younger, I had a habit, when you're thinking about something, I would just stare off into space. But if there was somebody in front of me, I would just stare through them. I wouldn't even see them there because I'm in my head. But yeah, people used to find that really intimidating.
and they'd be like, why are you looking at me? And I'd kind of come out of it and go, oh, I didn't see that screen. And they'd be like, you've been staring at me for the last 2 minutes. I was like, really? So I had to learn to kind of put, when I'm going to go off in that, is to put my eyes somewhere like to the ground or to the sky or something like that, because so I don't like accidentally look at someone, because apparently I've got quite a thinking look as well. So they're like, why are you angry at me? I'm like, I didn't even see you there, and then no one believed you. So I kind of, so a bit like you, kind of learn how to put where to put my face when I'm going to go off like that. So I think that's quite funny.
It's funny. It's funny the skills we pick up. I wasn't anticipating my staring or my listening to be one of the skills that I would learn, but they've ended up being incredibly important.
Maybe it's providing context to the individuals as well. It's like, so they don't get scared when you're doing it. Like,
yeah.
This is the way I always look when I'm listening, so carry on. Might be helpful. That's really good. Before we end for today, is there anything I should have asked you I didn't ask?
Let's see. Well, no, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, and I'm really excited about what you're doing. I think fostering curiosity and empathy are two really important things, and it seems like that's what you're doing with your work with Mavericks, and I hope to do that as well with Popcuria.
Yeah, I'm going to sign up to that. Do you want to share the email address? The website address for it?
Sure. It's www.popcuria.com, Popcuria. So I squished together two words, population curious, because I'm as I've now demonstrated, a regular people watcher.
You know what? You can never be. What I've noticed is you can never be lonely when you're people watching, because you sit there having all this huge dialogue, and it's a bit like, I used to always wonder. You go in a coffee shop and say you're working, and you look up and there's a couple, and they clearly are a couple. They've come in together, they've ordered together, and they sat down, and then they just ignore each other for like an hour, and you're like, why did you bother to come out? They're not like they seem to be working. Like, one's got a newspaper and one's just like looking out the window, and you're like, you just need to try and imagine what their life is like. But then that might be just me.
No, it's not just you. That's me too. And it's one of the best things to do. You learn a lot.
You do. I think it's all part of that maverick curiosity, where you make a hypothesis, and then you see if it works out that way.
Yeah.
Would you like to come back when you're a bit further on in your journey? Maybe when COVID-19 has done what it's doing, and then you get to travel some more. Maybe
sure.
Revisiting that might be quite interesting.
Happy to.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Rosie as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. To find out more, contact us at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com, or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.